kulende dit kulero ni gare to bauti yake aseture asense moye studio tole live asende n'abasubati babere kuri semo ya Machengombu abuturaki konyara kubatogo sanga amwana barabu ekituraki konyara kubatogo kwa naset kulero na mangana ya horticulture omwancho muri ya extension in horticulture na mangana yebimeri biribiko birebu na chingeni andake buna mabuna matunda aina aturaki kubatogo kwanira abachikonyara bobago to semya na netumanya ninge tubwenerete gokora ekero abinte ibire mugondo gwaitogaiga anene mono meyoro gongorwa Gusii ni matenga mwana ryo kabamo kondora asense meri endekera tole mugondo kurinda sirit kulera nigo twatebatiga togekorere maiga sigeta seni yetu kya Ndizi TV ekiagera ntoli guchikobanyora na ende elia kabere igo genda utobwatia ase mitandao yetu ya Facebook na Ndizi TV News Digital asensemo ya YouTube Ndizi TV News na boigo na bogotomera SMS wetera se nambe yo era se screen ya ugabu ende tyanko togusanga asobwamo igo genda gutuma amaburia inogo cha megaiga elinde munya ko bamukubaburia libodi le lyansi liwete ngano iwete kuboria litome go cha megaiga banyako bakolinyora. Welcome ladies.
Thank you.
It's a warm welcome. I know you've just wondered what I'm speaking. I was just using my language so that I can welcome our viewers so that they can see what we are doing. Maybe they share with us. They ask the question to you so that we can share. Maybe before we go, well, maybe before we proceed, you can introduce yourself. We start with you, Annalisa.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. My name is Annalisa Hultberg, and I'm an extension educator in food safety at the University of Minnesota. I work statewide across the entire state of Minnesota with farmers on food safety and good agricultural practices.
Okay, to you, Natalie.
Thank you for having us. My name is Natalie Hoydel, and I'm also an extension educator in Minnesota. And I work with farmers across the state with the production of vegetables.
Welcome to Ndizi TV. This is a home of bananas. As you can see bananas around. Yes. And I promise when you go back, you have to live with one.
Oh, okay.
Yes. As we proceed, maybe you can tell us how was your visit in Kenya, maybe the weather, the food. I know we have the best food around. You just comment on that. You can comment on that.
Yes, it has been lovely. It's very cold right now in Minnesota. So we have snow and some cold. We have a long winter. So from November until March, it's quite cold every day, jackets. So here it's been lovely. Our food has been very good. We've got to have ugali, chinsaga, managu, and we really appreciate that it is a high quality food. It's not processed. We've enjoyed that a lot. We've gotten to meet a lot of people, gotten to meet a lot of folks from the government and the university, gotten to get onto farms and really learn about how Kenyans live and how Kisii live. And it has been very, very interesting.
That's
and very
great.
Welcoming, very warm and welcoming.
That's great. Natalie?
Yeah, I agree. It's been a really nice week. It's been a short trip. We've only been here for 1 week, but we've met so many people, so many really friendly people, and we've eaten so much good food.
That's why in Africa, majorly in Kisii, we welcome our visitors in a warm welcome. Now, as we proceed, maybe can you tell us, you know, in Kisii, in our region, and maybe in Kenya, we have a different perspective on extension. And extension, we call them in Kisii here, maybe in the region, or in Kenya, we call them extension officers. But in your case, I can see you call them extension educators. Can you explain to us so that our viewers can understand what is an extension educator?
Do you want to start? Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, so one initial difference is just in the structure. So here, the extension officers work with the county government, whereas in Minnesota, we are part of the university. But just like the extension officers here, we work directly with farmers. So we are out on farms almost every day in the summer, interacting with growers. And I guess we do kind of a mix of things. Sometimes we work directly when growers have questions with technical assistance. Sometimes we do some applied research, so we have networks of farmers that do research on their farms with us. And similar to here, we've got to go to the Kisii Soil Health Day
Yes.
at the ATC.
Yes, just
So
yesterday.
Yes.
Yes.
Or Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday.
Mm.
So we do events like that where farmers all come together for conferences.
Yeah, and similarly, we work very closely with our partners at the state agencies. So in Minnesota, it would be our Minnesota Department of Agriculture, for example, our Minnesota Department of Education that works with schools. We work with them, but we also work within the university, and then we also work with the farmers. So we kind of, a lot of partnerships. The other thing is we have a lot of NGOs, what we would call a nonprofit, a lot of these agricultural nonprofits that, for example, have a farmer incubator training program. So they have some land and they rent out pieces of it to farmers, and then they train the farmers. So then sometimes those trainers turn to us and say, can we have some assistance, some technical assistance? So we then reach the farmers through our partners. So in the same way as here, we've heard a lot about collaborations.
Yes.
We absolutely do the same because our team is very small.
Yes. So
we have
majorly
two other
there
teams.
you work with partners.
Yes.
Very much so, because there's thousands of farmers in the state, maybe 3,000 vegetable farmers, give or take, that we could work with, and only a few, 3, 4, or 5
Yes.
Statewide educators
Yes.
that work with those farmers.
Yes, I can see maybe the difference between US and Gusii here. Maybe in Kenya, there's a difference between an educator and an officer. For us, we deal with the government, and for you, you deal with maybe people, maybe some institutions. For the university, that's what you deal with. As you visited Gusii, you said you were at ATC, you visited some farmers, you went to the farms and you saw what they do. How can you rate their production and maybe their production techniques at the farm?
So we only got to go to one farm this week.
Okay.
But we were so impressed. We visited a farmer named Rose Kerubu in Kisii. And her farm, she was so thoughtful in the way that she raised her vegetables. She had terraces made of banana stems to help with erosion. They were mulching. She had very thoughtful strategies about keeping like the sumawiki around the edges because she harvests more often.
Yes.
And so that reduces compaction when she doesn't have to walk into the bed to harvest it. So just really thoughtful about soil health and not compacting the soil. So we were very impressed with her visit, or with our visit to her.
Okay.
Do you want to add anything?
Annalisa, what can you add about that?
I would just say that it was very interesting to meet Rose, and the production practices, again, I would say were very good, very innovative. And some of the issues, it was interesting to see, were very similar to the United States, some of the same pests, but we were very impressed that she was very innovative in coming up with a lot of those kind of strategies to address them on her own. We also got to go to Drajimbili and got to see the market.
Yes.
And that was very interesting. We also have a lot of markets in Minnesota and in the United States. Farmers markets are very popular. They're maybe not so big. It was very big. But.
Yes. How can you rate that when you went to Darajambili, you saw the vegetables, maybe you saw people having vegetables there. How can you rate it with the United States?
Well, first of all, there was a lot of the greens.
Yes.
We like greens, but not as much. We're trying to get our people to enjoy greens more because they're so healthful. So it was nice to see so many greens, of course. The handling, it was very good that they were in the shaded structure.
Yes.
So there's a new structure we've learned built in the past few years. Keeps them cold.
Yes.
Cooler than in the sun. So
Yes.
out in the sun, the vegetables breathe, and that water will go away and they will wilt.
Yes.
So inside they looked quite good. They looked very fresh. We did see the cabbages outside, so it would be better perhaps if the cabbages could have gone inside as well, because the cabbage is one that likes to stay cool. And then there would be less waste, and perhaps the farmers could make more money because they could sell more. So, and then the cabbages also were on the ground, so maybe better if they could be up off the ground a little bit. But overall, beautiful greens. They looked very high quality.
As you've said, you visited the Rose Kerubo in Darajambili. You went there and you saw how she's doing her farming. It was a saga or managu.
Everything.
It was everything, every kind of veggies.
She was not at the market. We just went to her farm.
Her farm.
But in both places, yeah, she had the sumuiki, chinsaga, managu, omotere, michicha.
So you know everything.
Spinach.
Yeah.
So if you go to United
yeah,
States,
yams.
how can you compare that, maybe her farming and the farming in the US?
Yeah. So in Minnesota, there are many people from Kisii, and some of those people have become farmers. And so we work with farmers in Minnesota who grow chinsaga, omotere, these crops. And so it has been very fun to come here and see how they're grown here and learn more about them, so we can better support farmers in Minnesota. It's a little bit different. Like our climate is, it's maybe a little bit more dry in the summer and hot, and our soils are a little bit more diverse. So some farmers have very sandy soil. Some have more clay, like here. But like Annalisa said, it's funny, we're growing the same crops, and some of the insects are the same insects that we struggle with. Some of the diseases are the same diseases.
Just imagine what you saw at Darajambili. That is just low. They are low yields, simply because because of population. The land is becoming, the yields are becoming so low, and sometimes the quality of the product is not the best. Maybe what can you advise farmers in terms of the soil pH? You know, our farmers, maybe when you went to ATC, you said you were there just the other day, you saw so many farmers there. Most of them, when there, they want to know maybe the type of the soil they have and what can fit their soil. What can you advise farmers, and what can you talk about the soil pH, Natalie?
Yeah, so the first thing that we always try to start with is soil testing. There are certain things that you can know about the health of your soil without a test. So you can feel your soil. There are some tests you can do to see how quickly it breaks down in water. But for the chemical aspects, like the pH or the nutrients, a soil test is very important. And I think in Kisii there was a very comprehensive soil testing program in the 1980s.
Yes.
But now it's hard for farmers to get access to soil tests.
Yes.
And we just learned that Kisii County has a new initiative where they will be visiting farmers to test the pH.
Yes.
And that's a really important start. I think we're excited to collaborate and see if we can find ways to do more soil testing to look beyond the pH at other nutrients, for example. But we know that the pH in tropical areas tends to be very low.
Yes.
And that's just, we see that across the world.
Yes.
Because the rain washes out, it adds acidity to the soil.
Yes.
And so, I mean, there are products that people can use, like lime or ash, and ideally that would be based on a soil test. But in addition to just the pH, there are many practices for improving the health of the soil. And the farmers we visited were very excited to do those things, like composting, adding composted manure, things like Rose was doing to reduce compaction, having walking paths and leaving the production areas to not be walked on as much. And so all of these things together are very important. And it seems like farmers are very excited they already have a lot of knowledge, but they're excited to learn more about continuing to improve these practices.
And maybe, do you think when you say maybe the production area, is it right or not right to step at the production area? That's where you have your veggies, a small farm there. Is it possible? How can you advise our farmers to make the paths to walk on rather than walking at the production area?
Yeah, so at the farm we went to, there were like small beds.
Yes.
And so the walking areas around the edges, they were always the walking areas.
Yes.
And then the beds, she was planting things like chinsaga, where you might go in once a week.
Yes.
But not every day.
Yes.
And so keeping those things together and then reducing the tillage and the compaction in those spaces.
Yes. You know, the reason as to why they do that, I guess, simply because it's a production area there where there's veggies. They go weekly to remove the weeds.
Yep.
There are weeds maybe.
Yep.
So I guess it's good for a farmer to have the pathways so that they cannot be stepping at the production area. And what can you say, Annalisa, about that maybe?
I would add the use of compost was very nice to see. When we were at the ATC on Wednesday, we were at a climate change in agriculture and mining meeting hosted by Kisii University staff and others. And we heard very good questions from farmers saying, for example, I have crop residues.
Yes.
Should I burn or should I incorporate into the soil? Can you give me suggestions about how to improve my soil organic matter? And that's very important for the quality of the product and the ability of the soil to remain healthy and have those good microorganisms that will make the plants healthy.
Yes.
And hold that water when it does rain so it doesn't go away. Seems that there's a lot of opportunity to help the farmers come up with simple composting strategies for both the vegetable waste, but also the manure. So if your compost could be from vegetables or from manure, or maybe you combine them. So if you have access to that composted manure, it would be better if you can let it sit for longer, because the longer that it sits, the more of the germs in the manure that might cause human illness, they will die. And also if you turn it a lot, so turn it with, if you were able to have a shovel and stir it,
Yes.
then the heat of the pile will get more consistent throughout the whole pile, and then it will break down a lot. Try to wait as long as you can, plant, and then plant those greens into that. Rose's soil, she was doing that because she had access to a lot of the composted manure. Seemed to be a very high quality. When you held it, it wasn't compact like clay, but it wasn't too sandy, and her greens seemed very happy because of it. The other thing from a food safety perspective is the greens, the vegetables that we will cook, it's okay if in general, they're safer because we know that if there was some germs on those greens that could cause human sickness, when we cook them, it kills those germs. If you are planting something that someone will eat raw, you need to take more care to not get that manure onto the vegetables. So if you were planting lettuce that someone might make a salad out of, it would be best if you could make very sure that manure was not going to get on the lettuce, because then without that cooking, you could sicken someone. But it seems most of the vegetables are cooked here, so it matters less. In the United States, we have so many salads.
Okay.
We don't eat so many cooked greens, so food safety becomes very important.
Okay, maybe before we proceed, maybe let me speak to the viewers. I will use my local language. Sure. Don't worry, that's how we do it. Igobo no mwancho mwaligeria ni gonde na bageni babere kurwa chinsemo chiama chengumbu nigo togenda tukwanira igoro yobulimi bw'echingeni asomoni wekenya modero tokurukanga olericulture obuno bulimi bw'echingeni asibagera togotosemya ngamba chete mbacha gusiga iga bagatara balimi bakarobona bakoro bulimi bwabo nande ngikeli bagokora nande kerongoligereri iga asensemo ya Facebook nindo chenga abaligeri baitu nigo bagenda tutubwatia Isaac Zakayo agontebinga na tuned in yule mmoja koru aniga gotebanga team diaspora I'm following igonto genda tukonyora ibu amaboli ino genda kuyatoma gocha igerinde tubolie nanikete mwenda tagotegerera nande mwigwete kumugenda tukubaligeria asebenda tukwana igori y'ikingeni go bakwana igori yo cross compost manure mwanchu muri na sokorosia enkoro kwabeka kere gento kelio kurusi chikoni ali kwabeka ime lakini ende kwanya wonchora after week ya mo kwanya wonchora ekara woncho ire anyara koba yaba bono obuoyo boli kwabekera chingeni chiao ende chiachi koba buya igobona ganda gutuboli gutuma maboli no gocha megaiga elinde tinya koba to koba bolia umorobeli to bwate no kwana igoto kwana nachi extension educator kurwa sema ya Minnesota University of Minnesota kurwali machengumbu yoganda gutuma chi SMS chino to sange amange. Probably maybe if I might ask, how can you advise farmers when it comes to the animal waste, animal manure? Can you advise farmers to use that in their farms?
Yes. Like I said, it is very good for the soil. So when we add organic matter, if it's from vegetables or if it's from animals, that allows more of that organic matter to be in the soil. So the structure of the soil is more fluffy and less compact, which is very good.
Yes.
It allows the water to stay with the roots and other things. So yes, using the manure is definitely a good practice, but remember that manure does have some germs in it that can make people sick. So we know that animals can get sick from these germs.
Yes.
We can see our animals getting sick. Sometimes those germs, even if the animal isn't sick, they can have things in their waste that can make us sick. So especially if you are planting anything that will be eaten raw, a fruit, lettuce, I'm not sure, tomatoes sometimes might be eaten raw.
Yes.
Do your best to keep those things up off the ground if you're using that manure. Compost the manure very well, turn it. Really try to do your best to make it not touch that plant, because what we know is we can't, even though we will wash the vegetables, we can't get all of that manure off.
Yes.
So it's tiny, you need a microscope to see the germs, very small. So even though we wash, they might still be there. So when we cook, that cooking step will kill them. We still need to have good practices, but the cooking step will generally make them quite safe. But for the salad, for maybe carrots or fruit or things that we will be eating raw, no cooking. So even a little bit might make us sick.
Yes.
Can I add something?
Yes, you can add. You can
Yes,
just
please
add.
do.
Yes.
So in addition to the food safety,
Yes.
manure provides very important nutrients to
Yes.
plants,
Yes.
but sometimes it can be a lot,
Yes.
especially of phosphorus. And when phosphorus gets into streams and rivers and lakes, it can be polluting.
Yes.
And so that's one reason why continuing to build capacity to do soil testing is very important, so that we can know how much manure to add. In Minnesota on vegetable farms, we often see way too much. And so some good practices are, adding the right amount, not too much at once, but also being mindful about if there's a stream coming through your farm, maybe not applying too close to the stream, and really trying to prevent erosion so that the manure doesn't wash down hills into
Yes.
streams.
Yes. Says the production of vegetables in our area. It has been there traditionally until right now. How can you advise farmers in terms of production, maybe the production techniques that they can use for them to improve the production of veggies in our local, maybe from here in Kisii and Nyamira County?
I feel like since we only visited one farm,
Yes.
it's hard to know exactly. I think maybe we would need some more time to meet more farmers to make very broad recommendations.
Yes.
But I think some of the things we talked about already, the erosion control, the compaction, some farmers are already doing these things and doing a really great job. I think we did not see very many diseases, but I know when our colleagues came a few years ago, they saw more plant disease. And so practices like crop rotation,
Yes.
removing the residues of diseased plants. So it's really great to compost residues and return them to the soil. But if farmers are seeing diseases, taking that residue far away from their healthy plants, maybe burning it. Practices like starting the day in the youngest and the healthiest plants,
Yes.
and then going and ending your day in the older plants that
Yes.
maybe are more diseased, and making sure to wash your tools and your shoes so that the next day when you start in those young and healthy plants,
Yes.
you're not spreading disease.
Yeah. Maybe as you have said, is there maybe can our farmers use the products from the gross, maybe the product that they can use to spray the spray ones, to spray the medicine ones to the veggies? Can you advise them for that? Because you have said they have to use the local things, maybe to wash their shoes, to you remove the residues. Maybe to the crop that it maybe has a disease, they have to eliminate it from the farm. What if they use those medicines?
Yeah, so certainly sometimes it makes sense to use like an insecticide or
Yes.
a fungicide, but often, and with the farmers that we work with in Minnesota, we always start with the idea that that's like the last thing.
Yes.
That it's better to start with very good sanitation, to start with just thoughtful practices like starting your day in the healthiest, youngest plants. And then if things get worse, maybe then going to a product like that. Ideally, the farmers could maybe work with extension officers to ask what the best product is, because it's very easy to apply maybe something that's not the best fit. So yesterday, for example, we went to an agro vet
Yes.
and asked about the small beetles on chinsaga.
Yes.
And the product that they recommended would be effective. It would kill the insects, but it's what we would call broad spectrum.
Yes.
So it doesn't just kill the beetles, it has impacts on other beneficial insects that we want to keep on our farms,
Yes.
because those insects help to keep the ecosystem balanced.
Okay.
And that product also, at least when people use it in Minnesota, it has some water quality issues. And so making sure that people can read the labels as much as possible, follow things like on the label, there's something called a pre-harvest interval. So that's how long you should wait before applying and harvesting, so that people are not consuming the residues. So we don't discourage people from using those products, but we encourage them to use them very carefully and thoughtfully, and often with support or advice from an extension officer.
So generally your advice is for farmers not to be using these products most of the time, because they end up killing the most important maybe nutrients from the soil. Maybe they end up maybe removing some the important things, not just to kill maybe the things that affect the production of maybe the veggies.
Yeah, it's hard to make like broad statements to say never do this or always do this. So it's more like it's one tool that we have, but there are some other tools like crop rotation and covering the vegetables that are very susceptible to insects, removing the diseased leaves, things like that people can do first, and then if it gets worse, then maybe use a product like a pesticide.
Yes, that is very much okay. In our region here, there's something we call top dressing. It happens mostly to farmers who have maize plantations, beans plantations, but to some extent right away, most farmers are starting to use the top dressing method maybe to improve their production. I don't know whether it's practiced in the US, and what can you advise farmers mostly here in our region in Kisii and Nyamira County? You can answer, Natalie or Annalisa.
No, Natalie, go.
Okay.
Okay. So top dressing can be a very important practice, because when you use a very concentrated fertilizer, especially nitrogen, when it rains, it will attach to the water and leave the soil, or leach through the soil. And so by applying a little bit when you plant, and then coming back in a couple of weeks and applying a little bit more, you are helping to make sure that the nitrogen is going to the plants and not leaving the system. If you're using like a manure or a compost, that nitrogen takes a long time to break down and become available, and so it's not so important. You can put it on at the beginning, but if you're using like a concentrated synthetic fertilizer, like is it DAP?
DAP, yeah, DAP.
Yes, that's what you use.
Yeah, something like that, then it's okay to apply some at the beginning and then some a little bit later. And one practice that we usually recommend with top dressing is not to just sprinkle it on the soil, but instead, and it depends on the system. If it's chinsaga and the seeds are just everywhere, then you kind of just have to spread it. But if it's like managu and you have a row, you could like use a hoe and make a very shallow ditch or a trench, like a few inches, and sprinkle it in there and then cover it so it's mixed into the soil and right by the plant roots, and that helps it from not washing away so easily.
I guess that one is a perfect way to use, maybe to make a trench, a small trench. You apply there. Most farmers here in the region, I've seen them practicing maybe even the chinsaga, they're planting rows.
Okay.
So I guess it's a way, a method that can help them. If they dig a trench, they apply the manure, probably maybe the fertilizer, the CAN, and apply them, maybe it's good, so that they cannot sprinkle everywhere. Maybe it can end up affecting the leaves itself. Yes. Now, maybe what can you say? You said you went to ATC.
Yes.
You saw more farmers there.
Yes.
They had questions. What can you say about maybe the problem that you discovered they had as farmers of veggies?
Well, it was at the processing plant. So we met with Upendo, the women's cooperative that were growing the bananas, and then now the greens and other things, and then bringing that in and processing it at the facility and selling it under the label of Boca Eats.
Yes.
So this is an example of the banana chips.
Yes.
And they are very delicious. I will say that we have all enjoyed them. And so the facility at the ATC was very nice.
Yes.
And so they were drying the bananas. They brought the bananas in. They washed them. They had a machine that cut them. And then they left the peel on when they ground it up for the flour, or they removed the peel when they were making the chips. And then they put it into a plastic tunnel, an area which was covered by a plastic sheet, and then they had drying racks.
Yes.
And one of the challenges was that there was a lot of humidity.
Yes.
So here it is very moist. There's a
Yes.
lot of rain, and you're a lot of forest, so you have a lot of water in the air. It can be more difficult and take a long time to dry, and you have to be careful of food safety. They had food technologists on staff, very impressive, that they really understood the water activity of the product, for example, to make sure that it would last a long time in the package, a year, but also be safe, because if it was held at too long of a temperature, too long of time with too much moisture at a warm temperature, the bacteria could grow. So they knew that, but I will say that they were seeking more advice and more help from perhaps Kisii University staff, government, extension officers within government. It seems like they're in the startup phase. So they had a heater that was, for example, blowing in warm air, and then they had exhaust fans.
Yes.
But they could get some help with the engineering of that so that it was warm and dry in there, so that the bananas dried consistently. But the product was very good looking. And they also had an anti-browning agent, which is a food grade, okay to use on the food, that went into the water that made the bananas stay yellow. Yes. Because we don't want to see the brown. So that looked very good. So then the next step, I think, would be to also improve the number of dehydrators they had, because they were limited by the amount of space in there. They had a lot of help. They had a lot of workers, a lot of eager hands that were trained and ready to go. It seemed that they had access to a large amount of product. I didn't hear them say that they needed more, that they couldn't get enough product. It seemed that there would be enough. You have good, fertile soils. They were bringing in the bananas and the greens, but then the dehydrators would be the next step. So we know that Kisii University has developed extension, and others have developed different models for dehydrating the greens, for example, so that it would be great to connect those two and really get those pilot scale and to scale up to safely dry those greens. Then the greens could be used during the dry season when there isn't so much chinsaga. They also had questions about packaging.
Yes.
So this is a very nice package. It's also quite expensive. So figuring out the best packaging at the best price so that the food is safe, lasts a long time, and also looks good on the shelf, because we need things to look nice to buy. So those were some of the questions that the Women's Cooperative and Boca Eats had.
Yes. It was very nice. It seems it was very nice for you to be at ATC.
Yes, yeah, very, very impressive. I mean, and I will say, these are the exact same kind of stage that many in the United States are in. So we have food startups that are making jam, or making a dried product, or maybe grinding up basil in something like a pesto, we would call it. So they also struggle with understanding the technology and getting access to funds and getting access to the technical advising. So in our opinion, it wasn't that different, and we're kind of at the same level, and we're trying to build a way to store the food and add value to the farmer, so that they aren't simply just always growing the greens and then that's it. We have ability to capture more money from those greens, and then especially because your dry season is so significant, really making sure that those greens are available to all the families in the region would be very good.
Thank you so much for explaining about the ATC. We are going for a short commercial break, but before that, I have to engage my viewers so that they know what you have been speaking about, what you've been talking about, so for them to understand. Iko no omwanchi umurigereria no gende tukubwatia umuruburi yiga asta gende tukwanira igoro ya chingeni obulimi bwe chingeni asaba abageni baitu kurwa asensemo ya Machengumbu kurwa se University ya Minnesota banyariko bagototebia ali baruchiga igagusi kera bono kubabere gusia se wikemo ngogenda bakale tebiringa alieti simba chetoro mbaroche banana plant aliese factory eliyo korosia matoke nabo bakwanira balimi asebanya ko bakweranga nigere buya asomulemi gotumeka chinchira chirikie koro kwarosia compost manure to kuimukyo boyebwe ngombe buna burubo bese gwasiara chinyeni aina arabanya ko bago tebina bwo batebire buna ekerosimeze chinyeni chiao ekerote to kora top dressing usiaru boyo boli bwa CAN mbuya korosie metaro kerwa rosire metaro gwakorire kwabe ko boyo boli bokei gokogenda elinde elito gusiara iguru kyana barasalie amato y'ikingeni elinde elyo onyore oglige salire insemono igobono genda utubwacha ase mitandao yetu ya Facebook muna Ndizi TV News Digital ase nsemo ya YouTube Ndizi TV News nabo nabo gutumira SMS wetira senambe yo erase screen ya ugabo igogenda gutuma mabulino elinde linyara ko bango ya soma nabo nabo gontebie asukurigera likorwa umurubulyo igabo bole mikonda setkulera rero nigo tukuyokora etobauti yakase mwana la sensemo ya mugondo kone rero nigo ndinabageni kurwe semo ya Machengumbu nabwo ate mugondo nali kubaira nigo nali kubarete imega iga asensemo ye studio tatana nasomo timoka keigo ngoira Natalie.
Ndizi TV ubwansu bw'umuguzi.
Okay.
Ekero utagitutu arobole muntu mumuso bosi bw'abantu injiraneye muyuka Palamax Executive Spa and Baba aigani go kwingirwa chinjira chiya na chiria chigosonana naye tarigoryoka mbabwate massage ekero kwagingirwe na gukorerwa steam bath pedicure manicure gusokorosigwa chinjira chiria chiamagoko ni chiamagoro nkurusi abareri isankwa riria riarabokire nakororeka bobe nkonchoro lyabare etukirangi kurengana bunuraganie nobale imeyumuchu Kisii asamagacho akwanza plaza rirongoria kabiri asibara ya Kisii Migori highway akena mbeye eliobanyore enoti isano na ibere enoti kianda isano na ibere inye isano na ibere isano nemo isano niseto eyemo Pala Max Executive Spa and Baba.
Happy Sabbath, happy day omwanju muligire geta senikia Ndizi television gukwarigania ase enchira ya bene imeyo moroberio obwansu bwe Sabbath no moroberio okoretwa ase orekera litukolia Jumamosi gochakira chinsa 10 na ibere cha mambia goikira chinsa inye cha mambia imeyo moroberio oyo bwansu bwe Sabbath
abange tugukagera ngani ntu abanyana bo moyo tugukagera nagekora Yesu arwito ngomonto yo makare mu mugundu
yes
endagire kama paka akamanya goteba ngabona agachigotaka kubike bya ngabona moyo negoka
isaranza
yonkugure byage yigure linde ndia mutukonzi no mona matebi omoririo yo rero naganire ubugima bwao asenjirende ngomanye n'ubugima no manene
nigo togosanga amonaye ensemo ya devotion astokonyara koba atokonyora engane mwamu egotora ase omoroberio yo
where your treasure ari subi asibirengere byagobire ari no onye goko mwa Yesu Kristo teko bako ngumorizi onyago koranderio mundo nga karwense mweko
nyora boigongo swatore asa maigerio ye lesson astokonyara koba tokurigereria na koerera anene alianyare kobaga kwegwa oborito ime lesson ye chuma enkima lakini magiga ya mwanya bantu intukonyara koba togosaria so mugondo Eden nande twarangeri wase riogi turi ororo rigotebe nga missing ayore inchwe onyara koba part of the family
tiyo buruti bwa Nyasaye no burunge bwaye Matayo 5:33 na byonsi na momenteru
ase entunda ya gatatu neyo mwerio igotogosoa ime ya request hour
Kisii Impact Institute of Science and Technology ni chuo ambacho kimeidhinishwa na Wizara ya Elimu kupeana kozi mbalimbali. Katika sehemu ya kuwezesha vijana wanatoa kozi kama vile hairdressing and beauty therapy, electrical installation, plumbing and pipe fitting, motor vehicle mechanics, fashion and design na kozi nyinginezo. Pia wanatoa mafunzo ya wanahabari kama vile journalism and mass communication, video shooting and video production, audio production na zinginezo. Wanazo kozi ambazo zinatahiniwa na Kenya National Examination Council NEC na ni kama zifuatazo: Secretarial Studies, Information Communication Technology, Social Work and Community Development miongoni mwa nyinginezo. Pia wanazo kozi zinazochukua muda mfupi kama Computer Packages, Cake Making, Music Production na zingine. Wako na intake kwa kila mwezi. Wanapatikana mjini Kisii katika jengo la Twin Towers ghorofa ya kwanza. Unaweza wasiliana nao kwa kuwapigia simu kwa nambari 0705773142 au 0784663693. Pia unaweza wapata katika mitandao ya kijamii Facebook au Twitter Kisii Impact Institute of Science and Technology. Ni chuo ambacho kinakudhamini.
Welcome to Kisii Impact Institute of Science and Technology.
Ndizi TV ubwansu bw'omugusii
omwancho omurigereria nande twarure ase omotimo asitwasoire nande sensemo yende twende tukwanira iguru y'oburimi bw'eching'eni ane mono ritukorera nigo tubwate abageni kurwa sensemo ya maching'umbu baswati abanyakieni kegima kurwa sensemo ya University ya Minnesota asonde tukwanira amang'ano y'oburimi bw'eching'eni ane mono ekeribaganete bagenda tukotebya ngeri ng'ana kitokukora oburimi bw'eching'eni nande mbuli nikibuli boganeri nande naboigo bagenda tukotebya ng'a nande gosemba chikotebya ng'a na kitoranyori chiro gochia sensemo ya maching'umbu ng'umbu nigo bachite ensemo ya Gusii iga eri gutarira abarimi na kumanya ng'a nkikeribaga ne eri gukora gose gutumika eri eri kwenekia ng'a oburimi bwabo ngo babure obuya igo gende tubwatia ase mitandao ya Facebook na Ndizi TV News Digital ase ensemo ya YouTube Ndizi TV News na bwana bogo tumira SMS gwetira ase nambe yo erase screen yao gabo Annalisa and Natalie. Don't be worried, that's our language. We have to use that. We have to welcome our viewers so that they can be watching and so that they can send us SMSs, they can send questions for you maybe to share with you. Okay. As we proceed, probably kindly, how can you advise our farmers in terms you have explained how the farming is supposed to be done, what is supposed to be done at the farm, and the kind of manure and how to apply the manure at the farm. How can you tell us about storage and marketing part of it? You know, most of the farmers doesn't understand. For instance, in our region here in Gusii, you get there is a lot of rain, like right now. When there is rain, it means the production will be high. And when production is high, the market is very low, the prices. Yeah. How can you advise them to store their veggies?
Right. Well, it does depend on the type of vegetable, but if we're talking about chinsaga, managu, it would be probably drying. So the first thing for quality and safety is to keep it cool when you're harvesting. So trying to pick when it's cool before the heat of the day. So maybe early you're picking the greens before they get too warm, because it will be easier to cool them down if they're not so hot to start with. So choosing a time of the day when it's cooler, if possible, to harvest the greens. Move them into the shade as quickly as possible. So if you're harvesting here into a bag, don't then leave the bag in the sun while you go harvest other things. Yes. Move that bag into the shade, cover it to keep the maybe bugs and dirt out, not tightly, not sealed, but just maybe drape something over it. For safety, also trying to keep our vegetables off the ground once we harvest them. Even though I know they were grown in the ground, it's still best once we harvest to really put them in a container, maybe put them on a table up off the ground, because the ground is where our shoes are, where our animals are. There could be some germs in there that would maybe make someone sick, or maybe make your vegetables not last as long. So we're keeping them up off the ground. And then trying to keep them in a clean container so that they last longer and we don't have lots of dirt in there. And then drying them would probably be the most effective way here to keep those throughout the dry season. Yes. So as I mentioned, there is the dehydrator that is a prototype at Kisii University, and there's a few prototypes around. They have racks at the ATC. So I would say connecting with your extension officers, or perhaps going directly to the Upendo at the ATC and saying, can I work with you to try to scale up that project? But it's pretty straightforward. The greens are just on some sort of a screen, and it has to be a fine screen because our greens are small. And they're in a warm, try to keep it as dry as possible. And you will, this is why working with the university might be nice, because they might have a design that is sealed and tight and has been tested to keep the rains out. So you want it to get very dry, and then it will, once it's very dry and crispy, then you keep it in a clean container. Not sealed. Let some air come out during the dry season. Yes. And then you can eat it, or maybe you can sell to your neighbors and friends. That probably would be the best way.
What if there are those veggies that are very sensitive to heat, probably to the sun? How can you advise them? Can they be able to use refrigerators if they have?
Definitely, yes. That would be the best, would be to cool it down quickly. But I know that not all farms in Minnesota have on-farm coolers. So here, if cooling is not possible, especially with something like cabbage, it's so big, it might be difficult to have a cooler that can fit all of your cabbages. Again, clean, dry, really just keeping it up off the ground and as cool as possible is going to be better than the sun, and they will last longer. Did you want to say anything, Natalie?
I guess just with refrigeration, something that we see is it's very expensive for individual farmers to have refrigeration. It's not practical. So in Minnesota, we have some places where it's like cooperatively owned refrigeration, or like a place like the ATC or Upendo might have a big refrigerator that all of the farmers use. And maybe that doesn't make sense just for going to the market to bring your vegetables somewhere and then have to go pick them up and take them. But maybe, I know in Kisii, like there's chinsaga everywhere, but in other parts of Kenya, not so much. And so maybe for farmers that are interested in selling into Nairobi or to Western Kenya, thinking about how people across Extension and the county government and nonprofits can collaborate to create more of those shared resources can be a very important strategy for supporting small farmers.
I can see there is a following here. There's Brian. He's saying the ladies are looking so beautiful. I would like to have the number. So Brian, you get the number. And there's a shout out for Bismarck Mokwa. He's following. So we have so many people following. Momanyi Zach, Yule Moja, Evelyn, Eric, Ciro, you're following, John following, Sarah following. We have so many people following, and they are saying, you ladies, you are expounding your points very well. So as we proceed, how can you say about Minnesota? You know, at the university, there are students there. Do you do research about veggies?
A little bit. So Extension doesn't do so much research, but we're like the connectors. So we work with researchers. And then, so we try to really know a lot of farmers and hear what farmers need, and then communicate that to researchers so that the researchers can do work that will directly benefit the farmers. Sometimes we do some research, but it's not like theoretical in a laboratory. It's like there's a new practice that we want farmers to try, and so we'll have a network of farmers do that practice. So it's kind of a different approach to research.
Okay, we have just 5 minutes. My producer is trying to tell me you have just 5 minutes to leave on set. Annalisa, how can you tell us about the veggies in US, the farmers there, how do they sell their veggies?
Yeah, we have a lot of markets. We have a lot of interest in local food right now. We would call it the local food movement. So maybe a while ago in the 1980s, for example, we moved away from just buying directly from a farm, and many more people bought a bunch of produce and then they sell it, they drive it in big refrigerated trucks through a distribution company, and then they bring it to someone like a school or a restaurant. Now there is more interest in connecting farmers directly with that restaurant, the farmers directly with the school. So we work a lot with farmers to connect them directly to schools so they can provide food for the meals. And to the grocery stores directly, to the restaurants directly, and then at farmers markets, we would call them, and we have hundreds across the state where customers show up and they buy directly, and it looks just like Drajimbili, maybe a little smaller, but they have stands and they have their vegetables, and we go in and we pay them and we leave. Lots of interest in those. We also have a consumer-supported agriculture where it's a customer says, oh, I'd like to buy a box of vegetables each week, and they pay up front, and then the farmer ends up delivering to them over the summer, and the customer has paid up front. So it's a good model for the farmer.
Okay, so can you compare that with Darajambili?
I would say that ours are more spread out over the entire state. So here, maybe it's a little more informal. So you buy from your Drajimbili, but then also you buy from your friends. You
Yes.
know, Rose, for example, grew a lot of vegetables. So then people go to her
Yes.
and they say, Rose, I'd like to buy some vegetables, and they buy that. Here in the United States, it might be more formal, where we have a contract, so to speak, or just a handshake, but the farmers more or less know that they're going to sell to the buyer ahead of time.
Maybe can you sponsor those people? Maybe there's a group that are farmers. They grow veggies. Can you maybe sponsor them for them to be exporting their product to the U.S.?
Well, the export market might be difficult. I think, there's some things that you need to do for export. For example, there's going to be regulations around quality, around food safety and handling, around packaging. There's going to be a lot of testing of that product. You also have to have a large volume. So it would be very difficult for a single farmer probably to meet those volume requirements, and then just a consistency of quality. So the chinsaga that we saw had the ndudu holes, and that's okay for a local customer.
Yes.
And sometimes they actually like it because they know that it wasn't sprayed with chemicals. An export market wouldn't go. So maybe for some products, many years down the road, the export might be a goal, but it seems that there's so much demand here in Kisii and in Kenya that really making sure that we're using those opportunities first.
Okay, now I'm going to give you everybody 30 seconds.
Okay.
To give our marking words, maybe talk to the viewers as we finish. Yes, Natalie, we start from you.
Okay. Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, welcome.
And thank you to everyone in Kisii who has welcomed us. We've had a really nice time. We've learned so much. We feel better prepared now to work with all of the Kisii farmers in Minnesota who grow these crops, now that we've learned from people who are growing them here. So we've had a really nice time, and we're very grateful. We hope we can come back.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, also I would just say thank you so much for being so welcoming. We've learned a lot. We do have a number of we have 14,000 Kenyans in Minnesota, and a number of farmers, and a growing number of farmers, especially from Kisii. So we will bring your regards back to them and say hello. And I would just say that we have seen a lot of opportunities, a lot of interest from Kisii University, from the government, from your extension officers. We were actually able to meet with the governor of Kisii, and that was very exciting. And everybody seems very committed to helping the farms with collaboration. I definitely can see that happening, and the farmers were so knowledgeable. So really tapping into the knowledge base that exists among the farmers and having them lead seems like a great strategy that you are all doing.
Thank you so much. It was nice hosting you ladies. Until next time, when you come to Kisii, come to Ndizi TV.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kuya mwana wana mwacho murigereria kwanyara kubwatia umurobori yigasoro kwana igoro y'uburimi bw'Kingeni tonya ko batogosanga nabageni baito kurwa sensemo ya Machengombo kurwa University ya Minnesota asabanya ko bago tutebia mange na gutumanya mange igoro y'uburimi bw'Kingeni igona ende wikinga kiende igogenda gutubwatia semetano ya Facebook Ndizi TV News Digital SSM ya YouTube Ndizi TV News nabo na bogotomera SMS gwetera sena mbiyera screen ya ugabo ekero gendete kurigereria umurobori no gutigara sensemo ya Facebook nabo kwendera kuyobwati igaiga no chiteka chito chiereire mune producer ya Nego Ntebia wikinga kiende naende bye bye.
Ndizi TV ubwansu bw'omuguzi.